and that's on a specific skill. If we had a kindergarten student and we were working on letter names or letter sounds, we would want to reassess that weekly to make sure that the intervention is working. And then we also have what we call our summative or end of the year data, and that's where we look at like our state testing, the NAEP testing. That's when we look at everything all together. ACT testing, that's considered in the summative range. So the two types of assessments that we use at least 3 times a year within Grand Forks Public Schools are what we call CBMs, or curriculum-based measures, and we use those for all students in grades K through 5. We have them for both reading and math. And then all students grades K through 12 take what we call the CAT, or that stands for Computer Adaptive Test. And again, that's in both reading and math. And that test adjusts to the level of how the students are doing. So if you get a question right, the test gets harder. If you get a question wrong, the test gets easier. So for the CBMs, those are assessed individually. The student or an interventionist, someone within the building, takes the student and shows them a 1-minute measure. In kindergarten, we look at things like letter names, letter sounds, phoneme segmentation, number recognition. When we get into the upper elementary grades, we look at things like oral reading fluency and multiplication facts. The CAT is on a device, either the iPad or the Chromebook. And they log in. It starts them based on how they performed on the last test, and then the questions either get easier or harder. So in kindergarten and first grade, the test is read aloud to the students. They listen on headphones, and then as they progress up, then it's based on their reading levels. We can make some accommodations in math if we know that the student is struggling with reading. We can have that read aloud to them, so we're truly looking at their math skills and that their reading doesn't impact that. So why do we do these universal benchmark screenings? We are a very data-rich district. We have lots and lots of information, but we need to do this so that we can make sure what we're doing is meeting the needs of our students. So at Tier 1, we use this data to help make sure that we're meeting the needs of our student in all those areas, and if not, where and how can we improve? We also look at the growth for all learners. So when we use Star Renaissance, it will set a growth rate for students, and we want to make sure no matter where they fall, if they're falling in that intervention range or in that range where they're achieving above where we would like them to, that each time we give that to them, they are still making growth so that they continue to stay or grow out of those ranges. And it also helps us identify students that might need Tier 2 and 3 intervention supports or enrichment services. So this year we have been working really hard to have teachers also use this data to help them guide instruction within the classroom. At the elementary level, we have implemented monthly data meetings, and I know at the middle and high school they are working on those too. And we have them look at different reports that our assessments can use to help them know how these assessments can help guide instructions. So some things we can look at are students mastering state standards? How do these results compare to past data? Are there specific student groups that are exceeding or struggling? And are students making the growth? And so that's a little bit of the data that we're going to share with you tonight. You'll see our fall data and then our winter data. So the fall was given in September. Our winter data, the window opened January 9th and then closed January 27th. So then it's live data, so we get it right away. We can analyze it. We can look at student groups. We can do different things with that. So one report that when we do our data digs with teachers, is we allow them to look at this, or they can pull this up, this state standards report. And so what it does is it shows all of our state standards, and the green means that the students are meeting it, yellow it's developing, and red it's beginning. So you can look at your whole class. On the left, if you were looking at the live Renaissance site, you would see the students' names, and it can kind of help you show which standards have been taught. So this is for the whole school year. So we wouldn't necessarily expect it to be all green as we're only at the midway point. But teachers can use this and say, okay, I know these print concept ones that we introduced early in the year are being met. If there's particular students that are maybe still in that red, what can we do for those students? What area maybe have I taught that I could reteach, and which ones am I not quite concerned about yet because I know that I haven't yet taught those? We can also look at student achievement growth. So the bubbles on this chart are actually students. If you were in the live site, you could hover over them and it would give you a student name. So when we visit with Star Renaissance, what they do is they figure out student growth, and they call it SGP. So when I take the measure in the fall, they compare me, if I get a score of an 890, they compare me nationwide with everyone else who got a score of 890. When I take it in the winter, if I got a 920, they again compare my growth with everyone that started at the same point as I did to see what percentile of growth I want. So you can see in the top right, those are students who had high growth as well as high achievement. So they scored a minimum proficiency and they also made growth. The bottom right is high growth and lower achievement, and that's still a good thing. Those are students who, although their skills aren't proficient, they made high growth, which means eventually their bubbles should get up to that top right corner. We can also look at it from the standpoint of what can we do for those students who aren't growing. So if we look at the upper left corner, those are lower growth but high achievement. So those are our students who are high achievers, but they're not making growth to stay there. So what kind of things can we do to modify? And then our bottom left corner is our low growth and low achievement, and those are the students we really want to focus in because they're not proficient and they're also not making that growth to be able to get up to that proficiency level. Once we are done with our benchmarking, teachers can pull up this report, which is an individual student comparison report. So on the left-hand side, you would see their name, and then you could see their fall reading score compared to their winter. And so we look for patterns of growth. The way they color-coded is red would be intervention, yellow and blue are approaching, and green is proficient. And you can't really see it on here, but there's actually a dark green that would show that you were in that higher 90th percentile. And we can look across the STAR reading, which is our CAT, and also our CBMs, and say, where are we seeing growth? Which students do we maybe need to problem solve a little bit more for? So that's how we have teachers look at the data. As district leaders, we also learn from this because we can see it on a broader scope. So we can look at the same type of reports and even pull more analytic reports and look at, are students able to perform to meet the standards? Are they making that adequate growth as compared to other students across the nation? This is a measure that is used across the nation. And how are specific student groups or grade levels performing? And so one thing that our Star Renaissance account does is it runs analytic reports for us. So in kindergarten and first grade, we use the early literacy test. And we can see that our district overall average is at 64.7% of our students are proficient. And then we can even break that down further into kindergarten and first grade. And one thing that we're really excited to see is this year we, in the area of reading, introduced a new phonics program called Really Great Reading. We realized that that was something, phonics was an area that we needed to kind of beef up within our system. And so to see that now, our kindergarten students will be our kind of purest data points as they will have the program all the way through, even though we implemented it K through 5. You know, those second grade students didn't really get the kindergarten and first grade materials. So to see that 72.9% of our kindergarten students are proficient is really nice to see. We can also do it by student group, so we can look at the primary ethnicity and follow those groups and kind of see where that breakdown is and what we can do. This is the growth that I talked about. So you can see in kindergarten, 68.4% of our students made growth, whereas in first grade, what they say is you like to have your district at a greater than 65% goal. So in first grade, they're growing, but yet they're not growing quite as quickly. And so is that some of that reteaching? Do we need to look at some of those skills to make sure that they're proficient?
All right, so here's where we start to compare the information that we shared with you this fall to winter so you can see some of that growth. So this again is the STAR Early Literacy, and this is that computer adaptive test or that CAT test. So what this chart tells us is that kindergartners in the fall, 56% were proficient or above proficient. And then in this winter benchmarking, that rose to 73%. And then you can see the same statistics for the first grade. And then the same format here, but broken down by student groups. Same thing as last time we were here. If there's a black box over the number, that student group has less than 10 students associated with it. So right now it's blacked out to sharing identifiable information and protect the privacy of those students. And then here is just another focus group or student group breakdown for you to look at and analyze. Again, we're comparing fall to winter. One thing that I want to note is that if you compare the chart that we shared in the fall to this one, in the fall category, you might see a percentage or two different. What I did is I pulled the numbers based on what was reported right now. So if a student moved out of that student group and left our district, it would have changed the data set. So to get as close to apples as apples we could, I used that information. But it should be within a percentage of or two. Okay.
So we can also look at this for overall reading proficiency. So this would be all students in 2nd through 12th grade. Another thing that we're working really hard on is making sure all of our students are taking that assessment and taking it within the right assessment within the benchmarking window. When we look at even data from last year, we didn't realize that, oh, we shouldn't be giving a 3rd grader who struggles with reading the early literacy, thinking that would be more skills-based, but that we need everyone within our data sets to make sure they're taking the right measure so we can actually do this analytical data. So overall, 51.8% of our 2nd through 12th graders are proficient. You can see the K-8 is Twining because they are a unique set in that we can't break them up elementary, middle, and high school because they are their own unique set. And so when I asked Star Renaissance, how should we do that? They said you kind of have to have them as their own because we don't want to just be pulling that. Then we have all of the elementary schools, middle, and high school. You can then see that based on the grade level. And really the kindergarten there, we still had a couple people who, we had a kindergarten student who was just, I think it was like 2 students when we looked at it that were very high, and so they gave them that, and we're working now on doing that outside of our 2-week window so that we have that data. And then you can see it again by the primary ethnicity. And then this is, again, that reading growth rate. So at the elementary, we exceeded that 65%, middle school too, high school and the K-8 one, we're not quite there. And then you can see the grade levels. So the grade levels aren't in numeric order, they're in who achieved the most. So we saw the most growth with our 5th grade students.
Okay. And this now is our 2nd through 12th grade students looking at that computer adaptive test again. And again, you'll look from fall to winter, and you'll look for those growth trends. One of the things that we'll note is, I'll go back to what Jess said, is implementation of the new curricular resource, Really Great Reading. We saw a lot of growth in kindergarten and 1st grade with the implementation of that new phonics program. So it'll be exciting to watch that cohort move next year to 1st grade, 2nd grade, and 3rd grade and see if those hold. One data set too, like at Twining, I believe their kindergarten started in the 50s of proficiency, and we just closed this last benchmark. 90% of Twining kindergartners are at benchmark. So that's pretty amazing, and kind of shows that some of those foundational skills, there was a gap in our Tier 1 curriculum, and now by filling that in, kids are getting what they need to be successful. And then here's that same 2nd through 12th grade groups, but this is by student group. So as you read across and down, I tried to highlight the column so you could see which 2 you're comparing as you go across the chart. And then the same thing here. Again, this is reading. And then by our other focus groups or student groups. Okay.
So we can also look at the math proficiency, and math is given through 1st through 12th grade. There is currently not a kindergarten math assessment within Star Renaissance. I don't really know why they don't have a kindergarten one yet, but we use what they have, and they have 1st through 12th grade. So you can again see that our overall district was 67.1, and then you can see that breakdown between K-8, high school, elementary, and middle school, the current grade level, and then also when we break it down into some of those student groups. Here's the growth. Again, we had overall as a district, we met at least at 65. We actually exceeded it at 66.9. And then you can see where those kind of break down and happen between the grade levels and then the ethnicity.
And then this goes back to that CAT test or that computer adaptive test. And this is just the math version of that. So again, you'll read across first grade, 75% proficient in the fall, up to 77 in the winter. So as you go through, the information for 1st through 12th grade is there. And the next slide would be your student groups. So as you read across and down, again, the columns are highlighted to help it make be a little easier to read. And then more of our focus are student groups. And just a few more slides going 1st through 12th grade.
So the other thing that we benchmark in the elementary level is what we call the curriculum-based measures, and those are the 1-minute probes that we give to the students individually. So this is also another great way for us to look at very specific skills. And so on these bar graphs, green are those that are proficient, blue are the ones that are approaching, and red is what they would consider intervention. And so in kindergarten, there are ones on letter names, sounds, phoning segmentation, and receptive nonsense words where you would pick out the word based on the first sound. Then when we go up to 1st grade, we still have letter sounds, but we start adding in other things as expressive nonsense words where they look at the word like PIM and would know that it says PIM based on the phonics rule. That happens up until 2nd grade, and then we also start to introduce oral reading fluency where they're given a passage and they're asked to read it for 1 minute, because then we can see even more of how they're able to use their phonics skills to decode all of the words. So you can see when we look at our CBM reading growth, if we combine all of the different measures that we can give to students that are normed, in the fall 43% of our students were proficient, and in the winter 53% were. And I should say every time they take this, there is a set number that you have to get right. So say in the fall, in 1 minute, maybe you have to get 20 letters to be green. When we redo it in the winter, it's a higher set. So maybe it's at 30. So those keep going up. The amount they have to get right to stay within the green continues to go up. This is a K-2 student CBM growth. These are the students that we're really watching, especially with the implementation of our new phonics program. So you can see the big gains in kindergarten on some of those really basic skills. 1st grade also had those, and then 2nd grade, what we're seeing is some of those students as they get up into the upper elementary just need more time because they didn't have those foundational phonics skills to start like the kindergarten and 1st grade students do. We can also look at it in math. So when we look in kindergarten, it's things like quantity discrimination, which number is larger, number identification, and then as we get into 1st and 2nd grade, it's adding and subtracting, and then when we hit 3rd grade, it moves into the multiplication. So you can see where we were at in the fall and where we're at in the winter. And so after we look at all of our benchmarking windows, we've taken some steps so that everyone kind of starts to look at this. So when we had our last professional development days, we did meetings. We did what we call data digs, where we shared building-specific data. So you're looking at district data at the elementary schools. We compared each elementary school with the district benchmarks so they could, and within the student group, so they could kind of start to look at those data trends, how they could use the data. We showed them different reports where you could actually look at specific questions to match up with the state standards, how you can create your own custom assessments. We're doing instructional and curriculum planning based on these assessments with our CLSD grant. We're meeting to look at this and say, what do we need to do next year for this to continue so that we have this good growth? Do we need to continue to do our phonics program K-5? What kind of measures can we add? In math, one thing that we were looking at is some of the just basic addition, subtraction, multiplication facts are a little tricky for students overall. Is that something we need to add to supplement to our curriculum to make sure that the students have those basic skills? It also helps us with our implementation of Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions, so then we can figure out which students do we need to start working with in small groups or in the tutoring programs to make sure that they can also meet that growth. And then what we'll do with this data is we'll also triangulate it with all the other measures. So I believe we're slated to come back in May, and at that point we'll have another benchmarking set with our STAR Renaissance, but we will also compare that with now our state testing. Do those line up? We can do NAEP testing, and we can even do some of our WIDA testing for our English language students.
Happy to answer any questions or provide clarifications.
Questions that board members have? Go ahead, Cynthia.
So I just have a couple. Thank you so much for your presentation and the information. The first one, I apologize for not knowing that. You said the higher set goes up. So is it more questions that they get, or is it, fall, spring, winter? Is it the same test and then they're just, okay, go ahead.
There are different forms of the test. So if, for example, if you're giving a letter identification, there's different forms, so they're not always in the exact same order. But what changes is the benchmark. So in the fall, to be green or on track, you might need to get 20 of them correct. But as we go and you're introduced to education and you have a chance to learn, the expectation is you know more. So that benchmark goes up. It might be 20 and then it might go to 26 and it might be 32 at the end. So the target is always moving because kids are expected to learn throughout the year.
But they are seeing the same thing, and so that sometimes they're answering some of the same, no?
Well, so for example, for a letter identification, right, you would look at a sheet and it would be the letter. So there's 26 letters, so many different ways you can mix them up, but the order changes. So what you saw for an order in the fall might be very different than what you see in the fall and winter. Same thing with addition, right? On the first form, there might be a 2 plus 10, and on the second form, there might be a 2 plus 10 somewhere. It's just not in the same order.
Then my other question is not related to that.
Sure, no.
So could you remind us how long the district has been doing that STAR test?
This must be, so I was still a principal, so that'd be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years? 8 or 9?
So when,
Dr. Brenner? Does that sound right?
so when,
Yes.
okay, so when, 8 or 9 years ago, when you started that, were you looking at the different demographics like we are now, like paying attention to, because, I mean, Native American students are way down, Black students, were we paying attention to that?
I would say not with a hyper focus like we are now. I think that it may have happened as we were perusing the data, but it wasn't intentional. We've always had to report out on student groups, whether it's a Title I report or end of the year report for DPI. We've always had to report out on those groups, but I don't believe the focus was as intentional as it is now.
Well, and also with that then too, there wasn't the tutoring or some of those interventions, right?
Right. All of those, yep, have been additions.
Monty?
Well, I would say, before I ask a question, I would clarify that the way you can dig into data now has certainly changed from when we had map reading tests before it went to STAR, and there were just was, to dig into that information was like, terrible.
Right, part of it is the platforms have advanced so much that, like the analytical reports that you saw are so much easier to pull, where in the past it was probably a hand desegregation of the data.
Yeah, it was really hard to discern that in terms of when a student would finish testing. Yeah, you might have gotten a red or a yellow or a green indicator light, but it didn't necessarily give you the great information you have today. Thank you. May I ask a question?
Of course.
Sorry about that. So I have a question related to, I saw that high school proficiency was like at 44% on page 26. Will you just identify that a little bit? I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean that our high schoolers, like on the CAT test, they're 44% proficient in reading? Am I looking at that properly, or?
The computer adaptive test, right, when I look at STAR reading for 12th grade, 40% were proficient in the fall and 36% proficient in the winter. So according to this test, as they performed, those students that tested, that's where they would fall within that information.
So how does that look then at the high school? I mean, I know these are, and we know this is a day they could have maybe cared less about this test.
Sure.
They've already taken their ACTs, or whatever they're bound for. At that point in time, are we still kind of disaggregating that data, working with high school English teachers to try to make some differences before kiddos leave the building? Or, I know that's difficult, and I know I'm asking a hard question, I apologize, but
No.
what does that look like for those kids before they exit our school system?
So this is the first year that we've asked all high school students to take the STAR computer adaptive test. So actually, after they had the first round of information and then this winter benchmark, ELA teachers were kind of diving into the type of data and reports that they had for the first time. So they were looking at things like Lexile levels. What sort of text is a student able to decode? How does that match what we're asking them to read and decode within the classroom? And then what does that mean for when we think about how we scaffold information? So, and then identifying students who need Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention. I believe it was last week you heard from Katie Arthur and how they're working at Grand Forks Central to look through the MTSS process to fill those gaps. Right now is like a 12th grade ELA curriculum isn't necessarily designed to teach you to go back and teach you phonological awareness, what you hear in sound, right? Say the word ghost. Say the word ghost without the s. What word do you have? Goat. So those skills aren't embedded in that type of curriculum. So that's where Katie Arthur is working through that MTSS process with people at Grand Forks Central to say, if you can't get that type of information and learning in your ELA classroom, it doesn't necessarily pertain to the 12th grade standards that are being addressed. How do we give that information or learning to you in a different way? Does that answer your question? Okay.
Sorry. So I forgot that this is like early, we've not really tested 12th graders before. I forgot
No.
that. I apologize. But, so this is really being uncovered, so to speak. And
Right.
as you get more data, there'll be plans
Right.
made to address that.
Right.
Thank you.
And that's part of why we have Jess Sporbird and Amy Relk as her high school partner to look at our MTSS processes to see how we're addressing student need. Do we have the systems and structures in place to address student need? Yeah.
Other questions? I remember when my daughter was in kindergarten, which was over 30 years ago, and she was asked how many letters there were in the alphabet. She said all of them. She
was
unfortunately has a little of me in her, which is tough. So I had just two quick ones.
Sure.
On the computer adaptive tests for the high school, both for math and reading, it looks like the percentile, the proficient ones actually went down from fall to winter. Is that significant, and how would you data guru is up there, interpret something like that?
So here's something about that data set that's important. In the fall, community high school did not take the computer adaptive test within the benchmark window. So their scores were not a part of that data set. In the fall, we cleaned up that mishap, and their scores are now included in that data set. So you included a whole nother set of students within the data set.
So we're really comparing a little apples and oranges, unfortunately.
100%.
Okay. Then the other question is, in some areas, it's Latinx, in other areas, it's Hispanic. Is that the companies that's doing that to us, or are we doing that? It
Yes.
just seems confusing.
Yep, so that is the company, what they've, the title they put on that student group.
Other questions, comments from board members? Dr. Brenner, Catherine, do you have any comments?
I do.
Go ahead, Dr.
Thank
Brenner.
you. I just want to thank the board, because up until 4 years ago, we didn't have the entire framework or structure in place to support teaching and learning, K through 12. But with the creation of Amy's position as Chief Academic Officer, our MTSS 2 coordinators at elementary, secondary, curriculum coordinators, elementary and secondary, our instructional design coaches, which were an outgrowth between two departments, technology and curriculum, coming together. Now we have really the right system in place to support teaching and learning, to support our PLC process, our 14 early dismissals, so we can really dig into the data. We used to dig into the data a lot, but it was done by committee. And when you're doing things by committee, these are full-time teachers trying to do things on top of their teaching load. So we have the right pieces in place to not only look at our data, now we're doing something about our data. So we can only go north from here. So I want to thank Amy and Jess for being here tonight, and Ms. Barch's entire department for supporting and teaching and learning the way they have been. So thank you, Board, for supporting the structure.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight, and then did I hear we'll see you in May with an update?
Yeah,
Great.
So lucky.
No, we appreciate that. We appreciate it. Thank you. Let's move on to item 5B, which is a child nutrition program update. It's on electronic pages 40 through 53, and our Director of Child Nutrition, Wendy Mankey, is here. So did you want to start, Brendan, or do you want to go straight to Wendy? Okay. Thanks, Wendy.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay. Just to the right. Let me look. Okay, perfect. Sorry. Thank you. I gotta remember talking to this. Even though I think I could talk really loud. I just want to say thank you, President Lund, members of the board, for taking some time to put child nutrition on the agenda. I really appreciate it and love talking about child nutrition. So I hopefully will just take about 15 minutes or so, depending on discussion. I don't know how many slides I have. Just to talk about two House bills, 1491, 1494. Just two community programs to help support our students and our families. Some general operations of child nutrition, and just some overall meal statistics I have, okay? So to get started, I just put some general student information on there. So the number of students right now at the end of January, we have 7,611 students. 29% of them are eating breakfast, and 67.6% are having lunch. After the fact, I kind of thought, ooh, I should have compared those to something. So I looked for pre-pandemic for school year 18-19. I couldn't find a lot of data in the data that I have at my disposal for percentages, but I did find that in breakfast in 2018-19 through January, I could calculate 201,571 breakfasts in 2018-19. And today through January, 195,349. So we're down just a little bit this year. It comes to about 44 meals per day, I think it was. And for lunch in 18-19 pre-pandemic, it was 529,344 lunches. And today, it was 484,670. So about 416 a day down. I didn't really want to start into free and reduced, but I did find that I thought was kind of interesting was October of 2018, families on free and reduced was 34.4%. In October of 2019, it was 33.4%. And this October of 2022, it turned out to be 33.1%. So we're all kind of in the ballpark. I was kind of interested to see how the pandemic maybe affected some of that. And being newer, it was kind of interesting to dig into that. So my next slide is just the big one. So our negative balance as of last week, 2/22, it was $17,256.72. Child nutrition does work closely with the social workers of the schools and with Amelia Hodgson in the foundation to try to help with some of these balances and get the support that the students and families need. And just a shout out to Amelia and Sarah. They've been great to work with. They are willing to meet. They come with great ideas, try to think outside the box. So it's been really great working with them. So thank you, Sarah and Amelia. That leads, speaking of Amelia, we have Classes That Care is a scholarship based program right here in Grand Forks Public Schools, based out of the foundation. Amelia is the executive director. This strictly covers meals and milk for students in need. So again, child nutrition works closely with the social workers. When a student gets to about a negative $30 balance, we send a notice over to the social worker, and they can look at that student then and make sure, have they filled out a free and reduced app? Do they need other support? Amelia gets involved then with the classes that care, and again, they do a great job. I get calls, sometimes many times a day, many times a week, from the community asking how they can help with some of these negative balances as well. And so I hope Amelia's phone is ringing off the hook, or she hates me right now. So we do have at least one great resource and a lot of great community members that have been calling to support as well.
Wendy,
Yeah.
can you comment that no child goes without eating even if they've got a negative balance of 50,000?
Correct. Right now, I will, and it's in my slides as well, so it's an ongoing thing, I think. So, but no, we feed our students no matter what. I can pretty much guarantee that nobody really knows if a student's on a free or reduced, just the way our system is set up and our cashiering. My admin assistant would probably be the only one, and she's not going to remember 7,611 students. So I think Grand Forks Public Schools does a great job at that. We give them the same meal. The only thing we do differently is at a high school level, they're not allowed to buy a la carte because they would have technically no money to, and that's optional as well. So speaking of the negative balances and wishing that they could all go away, there were 2 House bills in the legislature that's any child nutrition directors were interested in. So we have House Bill 1491. This actually started out, the original proposal was pretty much to be universal free meals for North Dakota public school children. And the price tag on that was $89.5 million for the 2 years from July 2023 ending in June 30th of 2025. And this does include breakfast and a lunch meal. However, when it got up to the House, they amended it, and now it's reduced to $6 million. And they have increased the poverty rate from 185% to 200%. So family of 4, that 200% of the federal poverty level is $30,000. This will provide a few more free meals, and I'll get on that on my next slide. This passed 80-11, and now we'll be heading out to the Senate to hear. So just for some statistics, currently 30,000 students are receiving free meals in North Dakota. 8,000 of those additional receive reduced meals. So this 1491 House bill would make those 8,000 reduced price meals free meals. This bill would also include 2,000 students who wouldn't really have qualified for either or, free or reduced. And so what this really means is a total of 10,000 additional free meals for a total of 40,000 free meals in North Dakota. We wouldn't really have any more reduced families. So out of the total of 117,000 public school students, I have to say public school students, or 34% would have free meals. The other House bill that we were interested was 1494, and it was titled the Lunch Shaming Policy. And again, I put Grand Forks Public Schools does not participate in any of the above. This did pass, except for this first one. It says schools prohibited from serving alternate meals or denying meals for students. I'm on an email chain with some House bill advocates, and this bill was amended for that first one, and it says if a student meal balance has insufficient funds for less than 1 week a school may not deny a meal to or serve an alternate meal to a student. So some of our schools in North Dakota, they do serve alternate meals, so they just want it if it's been less than a week. So that was amended. It did get passed, and it is also going to the Senate as well. Back to our community programs, we have another one right here participating with the Grand Forks Public Schools. So we have backpack program. I also get questions about this one, so I looked into it more because it doesn't really have much to do with child nutrition, but it is a good resource to be able to know about and to help our families. So this one is particular is put on by the Northlands Rescue Mission. They have 1,200 students currently weekly participating in this program. It is serving students at every elementary school in Grand Forks plus South Middle School to feed students for the weekend. So what they do is families, they get a form, they fill it out, the schools get this form, as well as Northlands Rescue Mission, and they come on Fridays, and they discreetly put in these food items into the children's backpacks. So they get 2 breakfast items, 2 lunch items, 2 fruit items, 2 snacks, and 2 juice pouches. These food items I have on the next slide. I could always go back. So right now, some food items, and they are always in need of donation. Ramen noodles, cereal cups, juice boxes, packaged snack items. And some might look at these and sometimes say they're not maybe the most nutritionally dense foods. However, and as a dietitian, when I was thinking about it, these are meals. These are foods. Maybe that child does not have anybody around to help them, so they're easy to prepare, to put in a microwave, maybe just run some warmer water in the sink. So they really do have a place in what they are, what they're being used for. So if anybody wants to help support a child, just $100 feeds a child for the entire school year. I sound like one of those TV commercials. As I just said that. You can go on their website, backpack program, the Northlands Rescue Mission, and it gives you a few things that you can pick from. Like I said, I learned a lot. Corinne is the keeper of the backpack program. She had great things to inform me about. So if you guys want to help as well, you can call her or email. It's right up there. So we have another backpack program as well, United by United Way. The only reason we're not as involved with these guys is Northlands Rescue Mission has the majority, but for us, they do serve our Head Start program and our SAIL program as well in our district, but they serve East Grand Forks and their Head Start program too. So a lot is covered for those kiddos. And then just why I had your attention, I just thought, wow, I'll talk about staffing challenges of child nutrition. I actually thought, so I might be a little biased, but I feel like child nutrition and my staff, they do a great job of actually covering themselves. We know that we have to provide meals to those students, and that's what we do, day in and day out. See, I can even get emotional because they do a great job. And so, we can't just always just say we can't do that today or hire somebody else in so some people I think just don't know how much sometimes we do struggle on a daily basis sometimes. So I just thought I would throw this in and kind of put it out there. So currently we have 8 current openings, 2 of which are cook manager positions. A couple of those 8 openings have been open the whole year. I don't know of a solution. Sometimes I don't think it's just pay. So I really don't. It is a great place to work, I'm telling you. I'm great. Half have been unfilled since the school year started. And like I said, usually then we just get it done. There's 3 of us that can help in the schools, but 3 out of 8, I can only be in 1 or 2 schools at a time sometimes. So I do find staff working above and beyond. They work overtime. Some of them don't mind it, but you can start seeing some of the burnout and the frustration. Mr. Brandon Bombach has seen some of that. Thank you for coming. There's a struggle to retain talent. You get them in and they're there for a while and then they leave for one reason or another. Changing the menu, we changed the menu quite a bit. So if some of you guys get complaints from your children, I'm sorry. But to less labor intensive meals so that I can make it a little bit easier on my staff as well as, getting those meals out to the students as well. Self-serve items go from serving to self-serve. Lack of staff makes it difficult for some to take vacation or sick days. Because of the cycle, this causes more people to be out with no coverage. Some feel like they can't take a day off or their earned vacation day, whatever it is. I find some people come to work sick sometimes. I mean, I have some really great staff that just know and they don't want to put their staff in jeopardy by not being there. Job openings in the community that pay well above child nutrition. Some of my staff feel like there's no relief at all. And again, like I said, we are still meeting our minimum requirements, but it's hard to go above and beyond, especially new. I would love to change our menu and do some stuff, but sometimes my staff has to come first and think about their wear and tear as well. I have awesome boss myself right here. We've been working with the business office and HR trying to, raise up morale, see what we can do for some of our staff as well. Griffin from HR and Brandon have come to talk to some of my staff and, talked about what's ahead and some good things, some positive things. So instead of ending on the doom and gloom, I just want to end and to say thank you to my staff for all that they do publicly. I know sometimes thank yous, it gets kind of tiring sometimes, but I really do appreciate their hard work and it doesn't go unnoticed. They are really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Questions, comments from board members? Go ahead, Dave.
I just want to go on record too and say, I do think you're great and your staff is great. And we know the impact that hunger can have in the learning environment. So just a sincere thank you for doing everything it takes to feed kids.
Sure,
It doesn't go unnoticed.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Go ahead, Cynthia.
Thank you so much for all that information, and I feel a little bit guilty because I was trying to help somebody apply, but it's tough because it was $14.50, and you can get starting at some restaurants 18 or 20. So if you have a family and you're a single mom, you have to weigh which one
You
is
do.
going to help you.
And if you have daycare and
Yep. My question is, can you talk a little bit about food choices? So earlier in this year, we were hearing that like some foods weren't available, and I serve on the policy committee, and one of the things in the policy, it was like, help me out, U.S. foods only. And I had a question at the meeting at the time about that. So talk first just a little bit about food availability for your
Sure.
everyday.
So our food shortages have been better this year than last year. It was crazy last year. But this year we're getting, I'm going to say Grand Forks is pretty lucky in that we get most of the foods we order. There have been some things, chicken nuggets. We get one brand from Tyson, but that brand had been out for a while, so then they just substitute a different kind. Apple juice has been one as well. The brand that we used to get, they don't make it anymore, so we just went to another one then. Sometimes I think we're getting most things. French toast sticks have been a hard one. Pancakes have been difficult this year to get. But in their place, we have these pancakes with cinnamon in the middle. Kids seem to like that. We have these pancake bites. I'm going to say they're not a favorite, but they're something. So it hasn't been as bad as last year. I try to substitute when we can. Some of them, prices have been way astronomical this year. So I kind of weigh to see if there's something. Sometimes we don't have time, I guess what I want to say is that I would love to try different chicken nugget, but sometimes we don't have time. So if that one's no good, then I just won't order it the next time if it's a substitute or something. So, and then the state USDA says that, I'm not quite sure if it's majority or most of our food, they want it to be made in the USA. They don't want it to come from other places. So that's a stipulation from the USDA. So.
Thank you. I had one other question, could I ask? So the other question, the slide about lunch, 67.6% of the 7,611 eat lunch. Do you think that the majority of elementary students are eating lunch? Do you think that a lot of the, because my office has been downtown and I see a lot of students going from Central.
I don't
High
want to hear
School.
that.
I was shocked, actually.
They do, yes.
But do you think that the majority of the students in the or is it cold lunch that's the other driver, or what?
You know, I work at a lot of schools lately, and so I think a lot of our elementary kids do eat our hot lunch, or we have the hot choice and we have the cold choice. Today was cheese pizza. I think we had 20-some sandwiches that people picked and or that students picked, and then the rest were cheese pizza. Most of the home lunch kids or the students who bring their home lunch, they kind of go in separately or ahead of the pack, so I don't always get to pay attention to who brings the home lunch, but I'm going to say a majority of the elementary kids are eating lunch in our lunches.
But I just had a kiddo, he just brings cold lunch every day, he just prefers it. So, I would say in my class over the last 10 years, a majority of the kids eat the school lunch, and then you always just have those couple kids here and there that bring a lunch from home. My own daughter, who's still in elementary school, like twice a month, she'll bring a lunch from home because she's like, I don't like either choice. But usually I can convince her to eat one of the
Well, thank
choices
you.
that are on the menu.
Thank you. Everybody will be like, where's the banana bread?
I can tell you in my two jobs, my night job as a grandpa and my day job as a pediatrician, there's been a definite change, and it predated you quite a while ago. There's been a definite change since the pandemic in the taste of the food at the schools. So, so these fourth and fifth graders will tell you, and I don't know if that's a supply chain issue or what, but even with my patients, I'm surprised the number of them that actually bring home lunch. But it's actually was pre-COVID and then during COVID and now after COVID, there's a difference.
Well,
According to the critics, those 6,
That's
7, 8, 9,
important.
10-year-olds. So.
That's right. I have eaten my way through school lunch now, and so I have something to go off of now if anything changes. But I think so too. I have my own children that have went through the school, and I think a lot of things have changed as well. My only hope is that I think about child nutrition. I think about the future. If we don't get staff or, if things keep changing in food shortages, what does the future look like for school nutrition? Making it, serving it, all of that stuff. So it is quite on my mind. But eventually, I would like to do some more farm to table and get some of those fresh, good, and maybe change that taste a little bit.
We can get Molly Yeh as a guest person or something.
Hey, if you could
So,
pull some strings, I'll take her.
Catherine, go ahead.
I don't know, this feeds into the conversation, see what I did there? But I have a high school kid who absolutely loves the lunch. And actually, the pandemic, when lunch became free, was the first time that they really invested in it. Before, it was kind of just a novelty to be able to leave campus. She eats more at school definitely than she eats at home, a pretty picky eater. The other side of it, when you talk about the staffing shortage, I was speaking with one of the high school principals whose kitchen, I think, staff is cut in half of what it's supposed to be. One of our Ware River High School, and he had students who want to eat school lunch, but because the staff can't do it all, the lines are long, and they have a finite amount of time, and so they're just finding other options. And Maggie, I don't know if you have experience with that as well, but you talk about a cycle that feeds itself. That was not intentional. That really is part of the equation as well, as far as the variety of foods and that sort of thing. So we do have to make sure that we're looking to recruit and retain quality staff to work in those programs.
And you pick on the one student who's on crutches trying to get through the lunch line. So, Brandon, is the nutrition staff part of that, part of the survey that they're doing for, and maybe you can speak to that?
Yes, the survey you're talking about is a market analysis for prevailing wages across peer districts and industry in the area, and those positions have been included alongside all classified staff. And I just wanted to take the opportunity here too to say, thanks to Wendy and the entire team. Getting to meet with your team in a couple of different spots is eye-opening. We thought we'd walk in and that's the only thing they wanted to talk about is the compensation. But it was to my surprise that it wasn't. It was actually more concern for their coworkers and that they wanted to fill those positions so that way everybody was kind of going into this together. And speaking of together, that's Wendy too. She mentioned being out in a couple of buildings. I think I had to chase her down for the first couple of months because she was always in a hairnet somewhere out in the buildings. Hard to find her in the office because she was always filling in. So it's a big thank you for coming tonight and all the work this year.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about the taster. The good thing is kind of like my patient population, they all grow up and go away, and then there's a new group that's there, and the same thing with the schools. And I think we have to keep offering them nutrition because there's an unbelievable amount of kids in this city who wouldn't eat breakfast or lunch if it wasn't for this school district. So I try not to twist it as a negative. I just wanted you to know about that. So,
Nope, none taken.
Dr. Brenner.
I also want to express my thanks and gratitude to your entire staff for all your work, especially being short-staffed. And also Wendy is part of our 18-member storm team. So when we're making decisions, when we're looking at the weather, we're thinking about her staff coming in at 4:30 a.m. and how many meals are we going to make, and then we don't have school. So there's a cost associated with that, and there's waste associated with that. So she's a critical member of that team as well. So thank you, Wendy.
I just pray for a day off for my staff.
Any further comments or questions from board members or administration? Go ahead, Cynthia.
I think we should let Maggie have a chance.
To talk or eat? Go ahead, Maggie.
I mean, I can definitely confirm that the line and with the staffing can definitely be an issue, especially for me. I have to wait until it clears out a lot in my current state on crutches. And it gets to the point, like today I had 10 minutes to eat. It wasn't necessarily enough time. And then definitely the taste has changed. I can confirm the Bosco cheese stick is not what it used to be.
Good to know.
Yeah, that's my one request. If you can get that,
Well, actually, that's it. Okay, I'll check into that.
yeah. But I'd say there's still, high school for sure. There's a lot of kids that go off campus and do their own thing, and there's a significant amount that bring lunch from home too. But I do say that the lunch options are good, and I mean they're tasty enough. So
Thank you, Maggie.
yeah, and thank you for all the work you put in, and it's very much appreciated.
They know you guys. They know that they're there for you guys, so they try. And it's good to know some of that feedback as well, because we just go in sometimes and do our day, and sometimes that's all. Feed the kids. So it is good to hear some of that feedback as well. And we know about we want food choices. We know you guys can go anywhere, basically. Some of you have more time after lunch even that you may not even come back. So it is my goal to make sure that we provide what you guys, what's trendy, maybe we could try and do all that stuff. So that is on one of my goal lists for sure. So thank you.
And on behalf of all the school board, please thank your employees, because
I
like
will.
most things in life, we have a tendency to hear negative stuff, and we don't hear enough positive stuff, and we need to, and any of us that are in the schools, thank them when we're in the schools too, because it's not an easy job.
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Look forward to the next time.
Welcome. Thank you for your time.
Let's move on to item 5C, which is legislative update, electronic pages 54 and 55. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into the bills. House Bill 1532 is one we've been watching, and all of you have been watching as well. So thank you for contacting our local legislators and beyond. This is basically the voucher program, and it received a 15 to 8 do not pass out of committee, but it was carried to the House floor. And so we've got to really keep our eyes on this one and keep communicating as crossover hit the legislature last Friday. So I had Brandon run some numbers for us just to show what could happen if we lose 10 students, 20, 30, 40, or 50. Could have a major impact to our budget. So it's no secret that we oppose a voucher program. We don't oppose where kids and parents choose to go to school. We just oppose public taxes that are meant to support public education stay where they're intended to be. And I know there's been some discourse within our own community about that. So I just want to thank Melissa and GFEA for being loud out there and helping try to knock this down. The second one is House Bill 1464. This is the high cost of non-special education students who are medically fragile. Some of you have heard me talk about this before. This was actually part of my testimony a few weeks ago in Bismarck. This bill removes 75% for special needs students not in special education. And the fiscal note is $13 million, and that would come from the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction property tax. And again, that was part of my testimony indirectly about the weighted formula, which didn't go very far, unfortunately, in Bismarck. But I haven't given up on that yet. We're trying to find some alternative ways to see an increase in cost for special needs students, and which is supported by every school district across the state. Did somebody say something? Oh, okay. I'm just hearing things. House Bill 1491, Wendy already talked about, so if you don't mind, I'll just pass on that. It's pretty much the same information. Senate Bill 2284. This is the per pupil payment increase that passed the Senate appropriations. Right now, the bill stands at 3% and 3%. That's far short of what we've asked for, what we've lobbied for with, from our school district perspective to a local Team Grand Forks perspective. And that's also, interestingly, the same number that North Dakota United used. So if, part of me is thinking, based upon my conversation with legislators, in particular last Saturday, I think 3% is the basement. I think it can only go up. I'm convinced that it's not going to go lower than that. So if there's a way that they can also figure out some of the special ed weighted formula and tack that into the 3%, I'm just optimistic that it's going to be more than that. They know what our challenges are from our recruitment, retainment, all the things that you have heard us talk about. So that would be the skinny update of many, many, many bills that we've been tracking. And I'll be in Bismarck Thursday and Friday of this week as part of Team Grand Forks, and part of our conversation will be around some of the bills that we're tracking. So that's what I have for you, sir.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions or comments from board members? Thank you. Well, let's move on to item 6, which is recommendations for actions. 6A is the Head Start FA2 Monitoring Corrective Action Plan. It's on electronic pages 56 through 93, and our Director of Head Start, Tracy Johnson, is here. Thank you for being here.
I just want to piggyback on what Wendy was saying. Val is our kitchen manager, and she is an integral part of our staff. If you've been in Head Start, we have 2 hallways at our main site, and she is standing by the kitchen at the end of the hall, and every child that comes in, they get their hug from Val. If she's not there, they know they can't go into the kitchen, so they wait, they call her name. So she's just an integral part of our staff. So, I am here to talk about a federal review that we had October 10th through the 14th. The federal review team that came found some things that we were in non-compliance for. I did have a meeting with our school board representative, Monty Hahn, our policy council president, Dr. Lewis, and our regional representative about this plan, and so that's how this plan came about. Did I say Monty Hahn?
Yeah. Yeah,
Monty Gockler.
at some point.
Monty Hahn Gockler. She was, yes. Well, you guys were giggling, and I was like, what's... I'm sorry. I've known Monty for a very long time. Okay. The first thing that the reviewers noticed is we had 5 children elope from the playground. We have a fence around our playground. We have 2 gates, one in the front, one in the back. We've really never had this happen in the history of Head Start. And wouldn't you know, we had a reviewer, federal reviewer, on the playground, and 3 out one gate and 2 out another. We did have staff and the reviewer that chased the children, collected them, got them back on the playground. They were never out of view. We watched them as we ran after them the entire time. Got them back into the playground. What had happened is we did have locks on the playground gates. They were called S-locks. They were these really hard kind of figure 8 black clips. Very difficult. Children couldn't take them on or off, but the staff were responsible for that. But what would happen is they would leave the playground at night after hours. Our custodian checked the S-locks. They were on sometime between 5:30 and 10. One got broke and one was missing. So since that happened, we have replaced those S-locks with gear ties. And there's a picture in your packet of them. They are reusable, really large rubber twist ties. And we have classroom backpacks that need to go onto we'll go everywhere with the staff, field trips, the playground. And so those are connected to the arm of the arm of the backpack, and the teachers are responsible for putting those on the gates when they enter the playground, and then they take them off and put them back in their backpacks when they leave the playground. The other thing is that we're making sure that they are actively zoning the playground. Prior to this, we had staff on the playground with the children. Now we also have that, but we've included staff around the perimeter of the playground as well. There was a child that did run out of the classroom. Since that happened, we've placed Tut door locks on the handles. It's a 3M product, and it's very difficult to maneuver your fingers to push the buttons in and flip them up and then try to get the door open. But what does happen is when you have an angry child taking the lock or the handle, sometimes they break. So we are probably replacing 1 a month. And we have 10 doors at the main site that we're doing those on. They'll go into the hallway, and then the fire doors, 6 on the fire doors, and they were approved by the fire marshal. A second incident happened when those children were coming in from the playground. They were in line, and one child went and sat down by the light post. Was easily directed, but the reviewer didn't like that the child left the line, which was probably 13 inches away from the line of students. And so what happened is we have walkie-talkies that we wear, so support staff can go to classrooms when there are concerns with behaviors, so there's not a wait time. And that teacher forgot her walkie-talkie, so she had to ask another staff member to call us out and help. By the time we got out, the child got up and was walking back with the class. All the classrooms are using we call them the donut ropes. The official title is Hold the Ring Rope, when walking to and from the playground and from the gym. And we are constantly talking to our children about pedestrian safety because we do have to walk through 2 lines of cars to get to the playground. And it has been dangerous at times. This fall, we did have a child that was almost hit by a car. So we were finally able to work with Buildings and Grounds and install speed bumps along that walkway. So that was fabulous. Also, when children are walking on the donut rope, we have one teacher in the front, one teacher in the back, and if we have the luxury of having a third adult with the staff, that staff person is placed in the middle of the line, or if we're having children that are having difficulty holding on to the rope, they will hold children's hands. Another child was seen opening the door of the classroom as they were going outside to let in a staff member. The reviewer didn't know that they were letting a staff member in and did not appreciate that our child took 10 steps out of the classroom to open up the door. So now we are keeping the doors remained closed until all the children are ready to line up and head outside. Another thing that the reviewer didn't see was the children being counted during transitions. So we have updated our active supervision policy with Policy Council on January 17th. And another strategy we implemented is we have a very large laminated sign-in, sign-out sheet. So that lets us know who's present in that day, who's absent, and then where that child is going. For example, if they're going to speech, our SLP will check them out in her office. If I'm taking a child out, I would mark them out, then that they were with me. And then in addition to that laminated chart, we have a portable sign-in, sign-out sheet. So sometimes our teachers will take half of the class to our small gross motor room and keep the other half in the classroom. So we have that portable sign-in and sign-out sheet just as more documentation and checks and balances. Lastly, the review team did not think that we had enough strategies for effective classroom management when supporting children with challenging behaviors. And we have had a lot of challenging behaviors this year. We've never had to install locks on doors to keep children in the classroom. We have had a lot of incident reports filed, both for students and staff, for incident reports because of aggressive behavior towards adults and towards peers. We had to close a classroom this year because of lack of teaching staff, and so that increased class sizes. We have just found that 17 children in a classroom is not feasible with the behaviors that we're seeing. And then the staff, we have a lot of new staff, as Wendy has those challenges with you get staff hired and trained, and then they're walking right out that revolving door. So trained staff has been an issue as well. Therefore, as I write the grant, which I will be presenting next month, the 5th-year grant, we are asking for an enrollment reduction so we can ensure that we have 14 children in every classroom. We've also had a behavior interventionist position that has gone unfilled all school year, and that's been a loss for us. Our last behavior specialist left in August, so it's been difficult finding a qualified applicant. And then we do have a 60% early childhood special education teacher. I've worked with special ed, and we are going to increase that position to 100%. And so Head Start will pay 40% for a multi-tier system of support interventionist to help with our children who are lagging in those social emotional skills. And then I think lastly, we do have a training and technical assistance specialist for our region, and we have reached out to her. We reached out to her in the fall because we were struggling meeting the needs of some of our children with challenging behaviors, and actively supervising the rest of the classroom when we were dealing with some pretty big upsets. Any questions?
Questions about the correction plan?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I have just a few. Thank you so much.
Sure.
You know, as an outsider to this, it seems like some of the, some of the things are just happenstance, so to speak, like getting, you know, just happened that particular time. So I fully support everything. Now here are my questions. Who's Dr. Kelly Auden, who's providing the professional development on active supervision, and then Dr. Barbara Sorrells came in on the 9th. Were those like outside people coming to the district?
Yes, those are, yes. Dr. Auden is an early childhood specialist. She's a professor at Mayville State University, specializing in early childhood. So she's going to come and talk to us about active supervision. And Dr. Barb Sorrells is a specialist in working with children who have gone through trauma. And so we've had her observing in some of our classrooms and giving us some ideas how we can best help these kiddos. We have a pretty significant population of children who either had trauma in utero or after they were born.
Speaking of Dr. Auden, I'm wondering if you can correct that statement with her at the first page, because it says Dr. Kelly Auden will be providing, so one of those two just has to be crossed off probably, so.
Yes.
Other questions or comments from board members? Go ahead, Monty.
Well, I was on the meeting in Trace when she was interviewed by the people from Denver that represent Head Start, and Tracy just did a great job walking through every single element of and detail of what they were doing to correct what happened on that particular day. So kudos to you, Tracy. I think you did a great job with that. And then I wanted to see what Head Start was all about, right? That was a building I just had never spent any time in, and oh my gosh. I think, you know, I've taught for a long time, but I was exhausted, and I was just observing. And I was there for like 2 hours, and I was just like, oh my Lanta. And the staff was wonderful. They did a terrific job. But I did not realize, and shame on me, I didn't realize that those students get their teeth brushed there, and those students eat there. And the teacher has to help clean up, and the teacher has to help wash hands, and the teacher has to make sure all the shoes are tied. And that door thing, that's crazy. I couldn't get out that door, so I'm impressed that 3-year-olds could, but I don't know what that says about me. But they were so patient, and they were so calm, and they just kept moving the ball forward a little bit at a time. And then I saw, as I was exiting, I saw Megan Bond exiting with her kiddos out to, 100 below that day or whatever, right? And they're all bundled up, and they're all holding the little donut thing, and they're all going the same direction. And I thought, I can't imagine how long that took to get matching gloves and matching boots on that many children and going the same direction. It was amazing. So thank you for all your hard work. And I know your staff is incredible, and they love those kids. They're hugging those children, and those children are happy when they're there, and they're doing the best job they can. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just one quick question, maybe it can help. So they came in October, right? And then when you look at Exhibit 3, the first Exhibit 3, which came from the National Head Start, active supervision, it's multi-pages. It came out in November of 2022. So are they holding us to standards that came out after they reviewed us? I mean, it just seems confusing, because this came out a month after they were here.
Right. They're holding us to the performance standards. I think some of the things that they observed, for example, when the child was letting the teacher in the door, they said that it was a parent that was unaccompanied, and that wasn't the case. So some of the items, they didn't have the full picture.
Yeah, well, in past experience with Head Start and federal programs, they sometimes can be very nitpicky over little things. I mean, most of them have their heart in the right spot, but sometimes they get a little carried away, so.
Yeah.
So the administrative recommendation is to approve Focus Area 2 Corrective Action Plan. Is there any further questions or comments from board members? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the corrective plan outlined by Tracy.
So moved.
Motion by Monty Gockler. Second by Jeff. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Let's move on to item 6B, which is the consent agenda on electronic pages 94 through 103. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Cynthia, do we have a second? Second. Second by Dave. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 6C, which is waiver of years' experience on electronic page 104. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you. Jennifer Thompson has been offered the position as a first-grade teacher at Lake Agassiz Elementary School. That's considered a hard-to-fill position, and per the negotiated agreement and bringing this to the school board, we are asking the board to allow more years of experience to be brought in. So you can see the recommendation down on the bottom is to allow 16 years of experience to be brought into the district by Jennifer Thompson, and to approve her teaching appointment should be placed at a $58,139 BABS Step 17, and that'd be effective the fall of 2023. So we're happy to get her under contract this early. Thank you.
Any clarifying questions for Dr. Brenner? If not, can we entertain a motion to approve the recommendation? Motion by Bill, do we have a second? Second by Josh. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 6D, which is the general fund financial statements on electronic pages 105 through 114, and turn it over to our business manager, Brandon.
Thank you, President Lund, members of the board. I get the privilege of presenting to you the first 7 months of financials for this fiscal year. That's from July 1 through January 31st. And you'll see in summary, total general fund revenues are $62,394,000, whereas the expenditures are $56,326,000, putting the revenues over expenses just over $6 million. The report, as usual, comes in two parts and then with some charts. The first report is the budget versus actuals for the current fiscal year. And just one thing I'll point out here is at the very top page, that's page 106 of the electronic packet, is you'll see the revenue sources, local, state, and federal, and then other sources, or other sources if you're reading. The percentages I would just point out for local, state, and federal, you'll notice that they do come in at different times. And so just to kind of show how the state sources are important in the first half of the year, as that really helps our cash flow, where the local sources are just going to start to come in as people do pay their local property taxes. So the next couple of months, you'll see that come up. And then the federal sources are on a reimbursement basis. And so that's as we spend the dollars and as we file for those reimbursements. I'll jump down just to the second report here where I make the comments of different things I'd like to draw your attention to. That's page 109 of the electronic packet. And this has a similar format, but here the columns are this year's actual through January 31st as compared to the prior year actuals through January 31st. And this is it helps with understanding some of that cash flow if you're not familiar with the school year. Just a few comments here worth pointing out in that comment box. A few of these carry over from prior, including pointing out some of those ESSER dollars. One thing I'd like to highlight, and I'll do it again at the end, is the number 2. That I make the comment that there's variation between years, and this is just a dramatic example of this. Considering our revenue streams here, is the state foundation aid was paid last year on 1/31/22, and this year it was paid on February 1st, 23, and so that will show up in 2 different financial reports, and this rolls up to a $5 million difference that, if you're just looking at the charts in the end, could look dramatic. I'll point it out again, but we got that the next day, so you'll see that come into next month's report. The numbers do correspond down, and you know, another successful story here on page 111 is the legal services, where last year at this point in time, or through January 31st, we had only expended about $28,000 in legal, whereas this year it's $122,000. And so we anticipated that, but not to the fullest degree. We had budgeted $100,000 for that. But that is primarily due to the H-1B visas. And so as we look to close our teacher gaps and hiring needs, this H-1B visa plan has been strategic, and it's working for us, and it comes with some of these initial upfront costs, but I wanted to explain where those are coming from. And then just in summary here, when you look at the final 3 charts, the first is revenue, then expenditure, and then it shows that balance of our general fund, something we all like to keep our eye on. In revenue for the month of January, you'll see the 3 bars, red, blue, then green, and those correspond with 2 fiscal years ago, last fiscal year, and the current fiscal year in that order, is that we've been tracking well with an upward increase until you look at January where it dips down. This is that one-day difference I articulated earlier. And most importantly, again, kind of that North Star for some of my work is looking at that general fund balance. So the last chart on page 114, and you can see that we've been tracking well, and timing is the big issue here, where it looks like it dips down in January. You'll see that come right back up. If you look at the scale, that'd bring us close to 19 million, which would be ahead of the blue or the middle bar. So just wanted to point that out for you all and anybody listening here too. It's just a timing issue on that front. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and the administrative recommendations to approve the general fund statement as provided here today.
Clarifying questions for Brandon or comments? Are we anticipating ending fund balance about where we thought it was going to end?
Yes, so far on track, and we are expending on salaries yet, and even more than we thought with substitute teachers. As you have a shortage, then that comes up too. So we're watching closely.
Any other board questions? Go ahead, Cynthia.
Just on the note, the comments, so you said, so what is number 4? Includes Head Start ARP expenses, the career and technical ed building expenses incurred for design camera installation project. Where is that in the budget that you want us to look at?
Sure, so that corresponds with number 4, which is page 111. So that's in the other expenses categories, and that's purchased services. And so when you look at the difference between the current year's spend of 2.65 million versus 1.1 million the year prior, I meant to articulate these are anticipated and planned expenses and primarily driven by some of the federal funds that came into the district, like those ARP funds. The CIA expenses are unique. We don't build that building every year, and so far those have been ESSER dollars, for example. Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Motion to approve.
Okay, do we have a second? Second by Dave. Any final questions, thoughts? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 6E, which is third-party individual/entity request for student information on electronic page 115. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you. I'm just going to read through the memo so I don't have any missteps along the way. Policy FGA, which is a Student Education Records and Privacy, requires board approval of student information sharing requests from third-party individuals or entities other than parties to which the district reports student information under the law. Policy also requires a superintendent to maintain a master list of all individuals and entities having access to student information, including school district personnel by title. Choice ready, that would be military, career, college ready. That's pushed out by the North Dakota DPI, which we subscribe to. It's a new component of the North Dakota accountability system to measure whether our high schools are producing students who are ready for success upon graduation. The metrics within the Choice Ready initiative are intended to measure growth for North Dakota high schools as indicated by student readiness upon high school graduation. So there are 43 plus indicators that are to be tracked in the Choice Ready chart. This project has the potential to impact 7 of the largest school districts in North Dakota, of which we are one of. In phase 1, with the potential to impact all North Dakota high school districts, high schools or districts in the future. The district has entered into an agreement, that would be the contract piece, with Lead Home Technologies LLC, a web developer, to create a choice-ready module, which is otherwise known as a dashboard for our 2 high school principals who have been in on this conversation, both John Strandell and Chris Harrison. A data sharing agreement has been written between the district and Lead Home Technologies and reviewed by district's legal counsel. So we have the contract agreements in place. What this is calling for is the data services agreement, and there wouldn't be any student names attached to any of the data. So that's not concerning for us. So this is another one-off that we're bringing to you after we brought you the long list at our last meeting, and it would be administrative recommendation to approve Lead Home Technologies LLC to receive student information as necessary to their development of web application module related to the Choice Ready initiative and as allowed by policy and/or by law. Thank you.
Clarifying questions or comments from board members? I just have one quick one. So does this mean that this Lead Home Technologies might just do our district? They're not necessarily doing all the districts in the state, or I was just confused. I thought the state would want to be uniform.
Our district chose to take the grant dollars that we were awarded by the state and collaborate with 4 other large districts to allow Lead Home to try to figure out the data system to best track the choice readiness. From there, as the memo says, the hope is that that will then be made available to other districts. So we just kind of pooled our dollars across the state and are working with this company to figure this out. It's a different challenge for school districts our size to track all of these 43 indicators for choice readiness. If it was a small Class B school, the counselor could perhaps do that by hand, or the office staff, but we're working with an awful lot of data points, and we don't have a person assigned to do that full-time. So that's why this is an important project for us.
Thank you for that clarification. Further questions? If not, the recommendation is to approve this request. Motion by Cynthia. Do we have a second? Second by Monty. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 6F, which is consideration of fiber optic cable infrastructure bids, electronic pages 116 through 118. Brandon, back to you.
President Lund, members of the board, this is to renew our current internet provider, in that we have been in a 10-year fiber lease agreement with Midco Business that expires this June 30. Per century code, for any expense of service exceeding $50,000, you do need to pursue a bid through advertisement, receive those seals bid and open them, and provide that contract to the lowest responsible bidder. As a result, we followed this procedure. We received 2 sealed bids on February 10th, one from Midco Business and another from Dakota Carrier Network. Both were evaluated against a rubric. Those are included here in the packet for scope of project, physical diversity of configuration, customer service, experience qualifications, and expense. We had a team, big thank you to both Eric Ripley and Jeff Compton within the district that would review those. And we ultimately came down to administrative recommendation to accept the bid provided to us by Midco Business to lease fiber optic cable infrastructure at a rate of $400 per building across the 18 buildings for up to a 5-year term beginning this July 1.
Clarifying questions? I just want to make sure I heard you. So there was a team that did this, because in the report, it almost looks like Eric did it, but there was other team members that were working with them.
Yeah, fair clarification there, a cooperative effort in completing that rubric.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, the recommendation is to approve Midco Business for the 5-year lease.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay. Second by Jeff. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to item 6G, Driver Education Summer School Program. It's on electronic pages 119 and 120, and Ms. Galatz, our Associate Superintendent, is up.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. I'm going to toggle between pages 119 and 120, so if you can just stick with me, that would be fantastic. So I'm here tonight to talk about the Driver's Education Program. Typically, our summer school programs report in April, and the majority of them will do so. However, because attached to this program is the request for a fee increase, and we want to get going as far as registrations, our concern is brought to you tonight. So if you'd start actually first on page 120. On page 120, you'll see a memo from Director Bohan to me outlining Driver's Education 2023 plan. In particular, to highlight, there are 2 sessions that are planned for the summer of 2023 that'll serve approximately 192 students. They may offer a 3rd session if staffing allows them to do so, which would serve an additional 32 students during the summer months. They have a staff of 14 to 16 instructors working with students in June, and there's a 3-tiered program that they offer that you've heard about before, but it combines classroom instruction, simulated driving experiences, and behind-the-wheel training for students. The session dates you can see are listed below. We're looking for June 5 through 15 for session 1, June 19 through 29 for session 2, and if staffing again allows, we'd add that 3rd session, July 5 through July 14. One of the recommendations included in this program update is a request to increase fees by $50 per student. In essence, that money will help offset the rising cost of gasoline and maintenance, and as well as personnel costs. So the Driver's Education Program really is a program that funds itself to a large degree. I also want to remind you that a lot of our cars are given to us at a great deal by our local dealerships. Primarily Riddell's is typically at the table for us. So we are able to save some costs by our partnerships with other constituents in the community. That said, the administrative recommendation is to approve the 2023 Driver Education Program with a registration fee of $300 per student. And I'll do my best to entertain questions at this time.
Clarifying questions for Catherine? You got it? Go ahead, Cynthia.
So I hadn't thought of this question, but are there scholarships available for somebody if they really, so full disclosure, there are very expensive driver's ed options out there, so this is still a really good deal. But are there scholarships available for students if they really were struggling with that and wanted to do it?
Thank you for asking that question and for also calling attention to the fact this is a really good deal. There are instances in which we have been able to offset the cost for families in a variety of measures. There is also an option for students at some point when they become a certain age to kind of skip over much of this training and just go straight to the assessment piece. So between those 2 things, most kids are able to attain their driver's license.
Any other questions? If not, the recommendation is to approve the program with the registration fee of $300 per student. Motion by Bill and a second by Josh. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to the highlight of the evening. Policy review. Electronic pages 121 through 145. Dr. Shab, I'm wondering if you could pull out, because I assume you're going to do the second readings as a whole, if we could just pull out DKBB and talk about that separately.
Sure. All right. So tonight we are here to, I'd make a motion, actually, to complete the second reading as amended, written and amended, for gifts and bequests, HDD, HCAF, Food Service Procurement Policy, HCAG, Purchasing Cards, HCAD, Purchasing Computerized Data Systems, GAAE, Critical Race Theory, FFD, Possessing Weapons, DEBJ, Unauthorized Purchases, HCAB, Bidding Requirements and Procedures, HCBA, Vendor Conflict of Interest Disclosure, HCBB, Sales Clause and Calls and Demonstrations, HCBC, Fair Employment Clause and Contracts, HDA, Revenues from Investments, and HEAA, Line Item Transfer Authority.
We have a motion. Do we have any second? Second by Bill. Any clarifying questions for Cynthia? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. The reason I wanted to talk about DKBB is if we approve that tonight, it becomes effective tonight, and it doesn't seem fair to penalize a staff member if they're leaving early without some forewarning. So I wonder if we can not add to the policy, but I wonder if we can make a separate statement that this would go into effect the 2023-24 school year rather than immediate tonight. Otherwise, it doesn't seem very fair for any staff who happen to leave early. So I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Shab.
And I thought we had talked about that in the committee, about it not coming effective right away.
The problem is, I don't think it says that anywhere, so the concern is if we approve it tonight, it actually goes into effect tonight. So I think we have to have a separate statement that says it'll be effective the next school year.
So it's on page 129 of our electronic packets. And to be fair, I had asked Dr. Brenner earlier if the request that came through tonight, the social worker position, I didn't ask this directly, but I said, would there be punishment? Because if you'll notice, it's a 5%, which we had discussion about whether that was enough to kind of stop people from leaving early, because it's hurting staff, it's hurting students, and it's hurting everybody. Not picking on this one, but just in general. So shall we add something that says this would go into effect, or do you want to just wait on this?
I think we can approve it, and I don't think we need to add to the actual policy. I think we can just make a separate motion that policy DKBB will not go into effect until the 23-24 school year.
I'm happy to make a motion to approve DKBB effective 23-24 school year.
And you're also making a motion to approve the second reading of it as well? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Do we have a second? Second by Monty. Which Monty is it? Any other questions about that? Go ahead, yes.
And I know I've asked this question of Dr. Brenner as well, because when we've looked, GFEA, when we've looked at these policies in other districts, it has said that, like, it starts, 16 days before the contract begins, or 16 days before the first day you have to show up for work. And our question was, why are there no dates in there? Because there are years, like we negotiate this year, but now next year we could be signing contracts in March. And there's a big difference between signing in March and a teacher come June 1st, has a job somewhere else and wants to break their contract versus August 1st, wanting to break their contract, or obviously during the school year and leaving partway through the school year. So we are wondering if a date of some sort could be put in there. I know you can say, well, yes, we would look at that and we'd let them out, but that depends on the school board that we have at the time. So if it was actually in the policy, a date of when you start penalizing for each contracted year, it was just a question that we had. Because yes, we get frustrated too when people leave in the middle of the school year. But, when we're signing earlier because we've negotiated, that really, I know we want to keep our staff, but you're also kind of not giving them that opportunity of when jobs maybe post in other districts, and even our own district. We don't always have stuff posted for openings in March.
I think it's a valid concern. What I would suggest is that we approve it the way it is tonight. It could always be added into the regulation, and if we decide it doesn't fit in the regulation, then we can just send the policy back to policy review to modify it. But I think it's a reasonable thing, so. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Well, we didn't talk about that. We didn't talk about a date. So I made the assumption that a teacher is hired to fulfill a contract, and that contract says effective here till there. So I don't think we talked about March or April. So I don't know. I mean, I'm willing to, since we're not implementing it anyway, should we hold off and just review it one more time in committee? And
I would say approve it because we may be able to put that in the regulation and not have to change the policy. And then if we decide we have to actually put it in the policy, we could always take it back then. So just because if they can put it into the administrative regulation, then we don't have to bother this board about it. But it's up to the board's wishes.
Dr. Brenner, do you have a thought?
I do, but I'll follow Mr. Berger there.
I think it's a valid concern, too, that you bring up, and I wonder if something like this might be misconstrued. It might, again, I'm perhaps going too far down this road, but might it dissuade someone from signing a contract early and leave us in a lurch that we didn't intend? So I just want to go in with eyes wide open if it means a little bit more due diligence. I guess I'm leaning toward having a bit more time and making sure that, yes, we might know internally, or for those listening or watching, what our intent is and how we're going to revisit this down the road, but the optics of it may be something else. And so I'd like to hear a bit more from the board about whether we should make sure we're saying what we're saying, rather than, well, of course we'll talk about it later. Well, we might know, but that doesn't mean that everyone knows.
Go ahead.
I can tell you, one of the concepts that we've talked about is knowing fully well that I think we would all like to see a 2-year contract. And so that we know when we get that second-year contract out in March of year number 1, that there's a lot of time before that next instructional year starts. So we'd probably want to have some language in there that would suggest, that we would want to be noticed at least 15 business days before the first professional development day, or 20 business days before the first instructional day. So that would give everybody time. This isn't intended to be a gotcha. This really is it's an intentional way for our colleagues to understand the meaning of a contract. Because I think we have some people not really understanding when they sign their contract. They're with us for the year, and we've let some go this year, more than any other year. So that's really the intent behind it. It's not to penalize or punish anybody. But we just feel like in this day and age, we need to protect ourselves, protect our staff, protect our kids. So I would say some language like that would be brought to the policy committee, whether it's under the board regulation. That's probably the cleanest way to put it, the cleanest place to put it. So rather than put a finite date like August 1, because our start date tends to move a little bit, I'd want to use so many business days before the first PD day.
Other comments, questions from board members? Go ahead, Monty.
I like the date approach, and I think the cleaner we can set that out, like you said, the more we can define it, the easier it is for everybody, right? And there's to remove, this is what we're kind of thinking, but to Melissa's point of, well, this is the board this year, but, you know, several years from now, if that policy is still in place, a different board could interpret that differently, and the numbers just help to define and set that out, I think, or not the numbers, but the date. I think that's a good idea.
I don't disagree, but also realize if you have a new board in place, they can change all the policies too. No matter what we put in place, nothing is written in stone, so. All right, do we not have a motion and a second on the floor? We do. Yeah, so we either need to vote on that, or you two have to withdraw your motion and second if you want to send it back to policy. And again, it's up to the board. Yeah, you moved and Monty seconded.
It sounds to me like everybody was comfortable with it going to regulations, to follow your idea.
Okay,
So proceed, I guess.
okay. Yeah, and this is something that we need to get done and in place and finalized before we get done with negotiating the next contract, because they're going to want to know what it says before they sign the next contract. So I mean, it's not going to take long to figure this out, I don't think so. So the motion and second is to approve the policy DKBB. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Back to you, Dr. Shab.
We're now going to adopt, well, I love Cindy's notes here, presuming the adoption of their parent policy above. We're completing one reading as written on the following and adopting these as the official regulation. HDDBR, gifts to schools. So I make a motion to approve HDDBR, HCAFBR, food service procurement and bid protest procedure, DKBBBR, granting a release from contract, and HCBBBR, solicitations. That will be one reading.
So we have a motion by Cynthia. Do we have a second? Second by Monty. Any clarifying questions or comments? Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Back to you.
I make a motion to rescind the following: 3210 gifts, grants, and bequests, and 3311 authorized purchases, as both are replaced.
We have a motion by Cynthia to rescind those two policies and a second by Monty. Any clarifying questions by other board members? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's go on to item 6I, which is district calendar for 23-24 and tentative start and end dates for 24-25. It's on electronic pages 146 through 148. Catherine.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. First of all, Dr. Shab, I want to commend you for your articulation and all those policy letters. That is not easy to do. It's a mouthful there. So as Dr. Lund said, on page 146, you'll see a memo from me regarding approval request for the upcoming 2023 and 2024 school year start and end dates, as well as the start and end dates for 24 and 25. This is in accordance with School Board Policy ABAB. The school board is required to approve school calendar start and end times, along with meeting blackout dates, which are designed to protect teacher preparation time at critical junctures such as the end of a grading period or family teacher conferences. And what you should know is that there's a diverse team of individuals from across the district that represent all kinds of entities, including Ms. Bukup, who's at the table, who get together to develop the scope and sequence of the calendar. Our collective goals, you can see outlined there, include protecting the best interest of teaching and learning at all levels, protecting instructional time fluidity, consistency, and intentionality, protecting teacher preparation, PLC, and professional development time, and to inform our constituents. And there are multiple factors that you can see listed out there that are taken into consideration as we work through the calendar dates each year. On the next page, you will see that for the 2023-24 school year, we would begin on Wednesday, August 30th, 2023, and end on Thursday, May 30th, 2024. You'll additionally see blackout dates designated for high school at 19, middle school at 21, and elementary school 21 days. To ensure that after-school uninterrupted time for conference report card and standardized testing preparation is given. The recommended start and end dates for 24-25 include beginning on Tuesday, August 27th, and ending on Thursday, May 29th, 2025. Listed below are all of the persons who participate in the committee, and administrative recommendation is to approve the 23-24 start and end dates and blackout dates for the teachers as presented, and tentatively approve the 24-25 start and end dates, knowing blackout dates will be presented at a future time. I will entertain questions at this time.
Clarifying questions? Go ahead.
I'm going to go ahead and ask this question. This year, I got a lot of questions about President's Day. And have we had professional development days on the Thursday and Friday before that in general, or usually? Because, I mean, I just said, I'm sorry, I don't know, you know. It's the calendar committee is what I said.
Yeah, so, and again, the school board does approve the start and end dates and that sort of thing. Our calendar committee works through a whole myriad of scenarios, trying to ensure that when we designate professional development days, we want them to be appropriate in a manner that will make an impact on student learning. And so spacing them out throughout the course of the year is typically a goal, because there are things that we need to know at the beginning of a calendar year. And then there are things that we need to revisit as the year goes on and have some more time invested that way. This year's calendar was a bit unique in the sense that there were those back-to-back days in February. But again, our group vetted that last year, and it seemed to be the most sensible alignment. We used to have those February dates just off in general. They were always considered calendar makeup days for conferences, but we have taken those conference makeup time dates and tacked them on to have a full week spring break now. And so that was kind of our compromise for this current year's calendar. Thank you. You're welcome.
Other clarifying questions? Go ahead, Monty.
Well, and I wrote about, is there any appetite at all to develop, like, I looked at the amount of calendars that you guys have to look through, and that's overwhelming. Is it ever a possibility to do 2 years of calendars?
Excellent question. We are actually in the process of fleshing out the ensuing year's calendar now. In fact, we will have that ready before the end of the school year. It does get a little bit tricky because things change on us. I will let you know right now, hoping that it doesn't open up a big discussion, that when we made the calendar that you see in front of you for next school year, we aligned our spring break with the University of North Dakota, knowing the number of constituents that cross over. And about 2 weeks ago, I got notice from that organization that NDUS changed their spring break for next year. Because of, I think, the timing of, we don't really know why. We hypothesize it was the timing of Easter. When we went back and looked at all of the challenges with us making that change, we decided to keep course with this calendar for 1 year. It's a 1-year anomaly. That's a long answer to say that we are building out the bones of the next year's calendar. Yes.
And Catherine, just to be clear for us and also anybody in the public, we're approving the start and end dates and the blackout dates. We're not approving the early releases and all the other stuff that's actually in here. Those could potentially change because we have no control over that. That's the calendar committee.
That is correct. The board approves just as you described. The calendar committee collaborates on the rest of it. Once we bring something to this point of draft, it would take, there would have to be a really significant reason for us to change, because once we advertise it, people plan all kinds of trips and vacations and celebrations accordingly. So we are leery about changing it once it goes to publication.
Well, that's why I want to know, because people look at this and tomorrow morning they're going to start planning their vacations next year, so. Okay. Other clarifying questions or comments? If not, the administrative recommendation is to approve the 23-24 start and end dates and the blackout dates, and then the start and end dates for 24-25. Do we have a motion and a second? Motion by Dave, do we have a second? Second by Josh. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 6J, authorization for request for proposals for district copier services. It's on electronic pages 149, 150. Brandon.
President Lund, members of the board, district's currently in a copy lease agreement with Advanced Business Methods that is set to expire June 30, 2023. Just like the conversation earlier in the board packet, North Dakota Century Code does require that any contract greater than $50,000 must be advertised, receive sealed bids, and award the contract to the lowest responsible bidder. So as a result here, we've included a request for proposal submitted for your review and approval. And upon approval, the district will then send the legal notice to the paper to be published for all interested parties to submit proposals. So the administrative recommendations to authorize the administration to initiate a procurement process and post a legal notice of copier services. You'll find attached that RFP, and of note are the dates of publication, March 8th and 15th.
Clarifying questions for Brandon? If not, we'll need a motion and a second. Motion by Bill, do we have a second? Second by Jeff. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 6KLM, the GFEA, PA, and DA. Dr. Brenner. Oh, it's electronic pages 151 through 163.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. I'll just read the first memo, but I won't read the second and third. I'll just go right to the administrative recommendation. So on the first one, this is from GFEA. The petition was received by the board, posted in each school on February 14th, 2023. If not contested, the recognition step was to be placed on the agenda for the February 27th, tonight's meeting. If any organization had an interest in representing a group of teachers and wished to contest the claim of representation made in the petition, the contesting organization had to file with the Grand Forks School Board a petition containing a written statement of the contest together with substantiating evidence within 10 days from the date on which the board posted the notice of intent to consider the original petition. We did not receive any contesting petitions. So in light of that, no contest, the administrative recommendation is for the school board to recognize the Grand Forks Education Association as the representative organization for the appropriate negotiating unit as per North Dakota Century Code.
Any questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to approve that? Motion by second. Do we have a second? Second by Dave. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's go on to GFPA.
Same song, different dance. This is the Grand Forks Principals Association. Nobody contested that group as a bargaining unit. So in light of the no contest, the administrative recommendation is for the school board to recognize the Grand Forks Principals Association as the representative organization for the appropriate negotiating unit as per North Dakota Century Code.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second? Second by Josh. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. And GFDA.
Page 162, the Grand Forks Directors Association. Nobody contested them as the bargaining unit. So the administrative recommendation is for the school board to recognize the Grand Forks Directors Association as the representative organization for the appropriate negotiating unit as per North Dakota Century Code.
Can we get a motion and a second? Motion by Bill. Second by Dave. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's go on to item 7, other. 7A is announcements. Dr. Brenner, you have any announcements?
I have a couple of quick announcements. Just a reminder, because of spring break, a week from tonight would be our first board meeting in March. That might catch some of you and us off guard. So the board packet will go out Friday of this week. It's a quick turnaround time. Right now, the agenda is fairly light. I don't know if there'll be more additions between now and late Thursday evening. So that's just for your information. Ryan Elshami, our student board member who's not here tonight, qualified in a bazillion events for the state swimming competition in Bismarck this week, so good luck to Ryan. Maggie's Rough Rider ladies are seeded number 1 in the East Regional, in the EDC tournament. You're number 2. How did you fall out of number 1?
It's a little complicated, but I think we're number 2 because Davies has the tiebreaker over us, but
Okay.
we're up there.
So good luck to the Lady Rough Riders in the EDC as they prepare for the state tournament. And tomorrow evening, the way things worked out athletically, Central and Red River will be playing in the first round of the EDC boys basketball tournament. That is at Red River High School, I believe. Correct, Maggie? Thank you.
Catherine, did you have any announcements? Melissa, did you have any announcements? Let's move on to item 7B, board requests for future consideration. Do we have any future considerations from board members? Okay. 7C, school board norms. Dave, how did we do?
There are 7 norms, and tonight we went 7 for 7.
Great. Item 8 is adjournment. I have some great news, and I have some bad news. The great news is we got done early. The bad news is the facility committee cannot start the meeting till 9:10 because it's a noticed meeting, so we can't start early. So you can either take a 59-minute bathroom break or something else, because we can't start the meeting till 9:10 because it's a noticed meeting, and that would be unfair. There might be a public member who plans on coming to that, and so we are going to adjourn this meeting, but we will not start the next meeting till 9:10. Go ahead.
You're on camera. So we could all disappear. Just kidding.
Yeah, I can stay here. I'll just stay here and just stand still and not breathe. So we will see you all in, well, now it's down to 58 minutes. So if we keep talking, we'll be down there nothing. So we'll see you all in 58 minutes.